Thank you, Mr Speaker. This is an impassioned debate. We've just heard an impassioned speech from the Honourable Tau Hanari, and we heard earlier this afternoon from David Bennett. And, sir, this is an economic debate. This is a debate about employment. This is a debate about redundancy and redundancy provisions. And, sir, those things are very, very important. And Mr Bennett impressed us all, I think, this afternoon with his knowledge of economic theory. Who couldn't but be impressed with Mr Bennett's knowledge of economic theory? Look, I was very impressed, because Mr Bennett said to us, this will be a huge cost on business. Business will be reluctant to take on workers. Mr Bennett said, why would you want to make it harder for people to get a job? And that's a very good question to ask, Mr Speaker. Mr Bennett said what this bill does is this bill imposes cost. This bill imposes cost on employers, and it will make them reluctant to take on new employees. And so Mr Bennett asked a very reasonable question: why would Labor want to make it hard for Kiwis to get a job? He asked the very reasonable question: why would Labor want to make it hard for Kiwis to get a job? And, Mr Speaker, I asked this evening, why would National want to make it hard for Kiwis to get a job? If National believes that imposing a compulsory redundancy provision on workers would make an impact on employment, would make a negative impact on employment, I asked the National Party why they believe imposing costs of an emissions trading scheme, artificially increasing the price of electricity, why they believe that won't actually have the same impact on jobs. Why it won't have the same impact on jobs. Mr Speaker, Mr Bennett asked who would want to place additional stress on business? Who would want to place additional stress on business? Well, clearly it's the National Party, Mr Speaker. Clearly it's the National Party, because they are prepared to impose extra costs on business. They are prepared to impose costs on exporters, and so they want to do that at a time. They want to do that at a time when all of our major trading partners are backing away from an ETS. That's right. Just last Tuesday, the Prime Minister of Australia, Kevin Rudd, announced that Australia would be delaying the introduction of the emissions trading scheme until 2013. The United States doesn't have an emissions trading scheme. China doesn't have an emissions trading scheme. And what do? They continue to perpetuate the myth that our farmers, our exporters, won't be affected. We had the Honourable David Carter, Minister of Agriculture, at field days this morning telling farmers that agriculture wouldn't come into the ETS until 2015. Well, I call on Mr Carter, the Minister of Agriculture, to tell the truth to farmers, because he knows that Meat and Wool New Zealand have said the cost of the ETS to farmers, to dairy farmers, will be about $10,200. And three-quarters of that, sir, we're going to have redundancies in the farming industry. You're right, we'll have redundancies, sir, because Meat and Wool are saying to farmers that you're going to have to start paying extra for electricity and petrol and the emissions costs, sir, of your dairy factories with this ETS. And the National Party are in denial. Sir, this is an economic bill. This is a bill about redundancies. We should actually be asking the question, how do we stop redundancies? How do we recover from this recession? How do we reduce our unemployment of 7.5%? Well, sir, the answer to that is to actually put in place economic policies that actually create employment. We should be asking ourselves, why do we actually have a need for Darian Fenton's bill? Why do we have that need? How do we avoid that need, Mr Speaker? Well, we have economic policies. They make it easier for businesses to employ people and for us to trade out of the recession. And, sir, I'd just like to leave the last word to the Honourable John Key, Prime Minister of New Zealand. And he said just 3 weeks before the last general election, he said, we shouldn't be a world leader because that will come at the expense of our economy. And he's obviously thinking of Darian Fenton's bill. He's thinking about the consequences of unemployment. And he went on to say, I see no sense in New Zealand exporting emissions and jobs to another part of the world. I see no sense in New Zealand exporting emissions and jobs to another part of the world. And, sir, in the face of overwhelming change in the environment for emissions trading legislation and costs, when we've seen all of our major trading partners pull away from this, Just Australia, just last Tuesday, announced they're delaying the emissions trading scheme 4 years. What do? We have the National Party charging ahead with their head in the sand, and the Honourable David Carter, Minister of Agriculture, telling farmers in Waikato this morning that we're going to proceed with it. How stupid is that? And I can understand why Darian Fenton thinks we need to have a bill of this nature. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Charles Chauvel.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I want to just start my